If you go to a professional sporting event in the United States, the military presence feels entirely normal. A giant flag on the field, a flyover, a momentary pause for applause. It is a familiar spectacle woven into the background of civilian life. Here is the 2025 United States military budget compared against the combined spending of the next 6 highest nations. The U.S. spent $954 billion, a full third of all global military expenditure. That capital finances a network of over 800 foreign military bases. Behind that budget is a physical reality. The post-9/11 wars have resulted in an estimated 4.5 to 4.7 million direct and indirect deaths across Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, and Pakistan. The stadium spectacle and the global reality exist in the same world, but they rarely intersect in the American mind. For most, the flyover is the only part of the machine that is ever actually seen. Look at this vector outline of the contiguous United States, the logo map. It dictates how Americans perceive their country, as a contained, non-imperial nation. But zoom out, and we see a pointillist empire, a network of sovereign-exempt military enclaves stationed in over 80 countries. These bases often sit alongside dense civilian populations, functioning as insulated launch pads that allow the military to conduct high-tech, rapid operations anywhere on Earth. This geographic structure allows the United States to enact global violence without requiring its citizens to witness the daily administration of an empire. Its geography keeps the perimeter invisible to the homeland. In 1973, facing enormous public backlash over Vietnam, the government ended universal conscription and established the all-volunteer force. This shift successfully insulated the political class from the fierce anti-war movements that had historically constrained imperial intervention. To fill the ranks without a universal draft, the military began relying on socioeconomic vulnerability. Recruiters target economically devastated regions, leveraging housing insecurity and crushing student debt as the primary incentives to meet their enlistment quotas. Programs like the Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps, or JROTC, help secure this pipeline. In many districts, JROTC automatically enrolls students in marginalized, low-income public schools, effectively substituting physical education with military recruitment. By removing the burden of service from the middle and upper classes, war was transformed into a spectator sport, something conducted on credit by a small, vulnerable percentage of the population. The Pentagon actively curates how civilians consume this spectacle. Through the Entertainment Liaison Office, the military grants filmmakers access to expensive equipment and locations, provided they accept strict script approval. This ensures that depictions of war crimes, friendly fire, and suicide are censored before production begins. They curate professional sports too. Until 2009, NFL players typically stayed in the locker room during the national anthem. The on-field rituals that millions now treat as eternal tradition began as a multi-million-dollar marketing campaign paid for by the Department of Defense. These sustained, taxpayer-funded investments ensure that the public's perception of the military remains a managed, high-quality product, effectively preventing critical thought through a veneer of patriotic deity. Sociologists identify this dynamic as an American civil religion, where armed power has become the primary measure of national virtue. In this framework, the soldier is elevated to a savior figure, and questioning foreign policy is often treated as a desecration of that sacrifice. This side-by-side checklist highlights structural traits shared by the U.S. system and regimes Americans regard as obviously militarist, like North Korea. Both feature politically untouchable defense budgets, military pageantry embedded in civilian life, and the sacralization of the armed forces as the core of the nation. The fact that Americans find this comparison deeply offensive is evidence of the religious nature of the relationship. To a civilian population raised inside the system, rational structural criticism can feel like an act of heresy. When civilians offer a casual "thank you for your service," it acts as a quick ritual to discharge a sense of civic obligation. It allows both parties to retreat to separate camps without ever confronting the actual trauma absorbed by the volunteer force. Since 2001, at least 30,177 active duty personnel and veterans have died by suicide. That interior death toll outpaces direct combat deaths by a ratio of more than 4-to-1. There is an environmental cost falling inward, too. The Department of Defense is the single largest institutional emitter of greenhouse gases on the planet. During the drafting of international climate agreements, the military successfully lobbied to exempt its emissions from regulatory frameworks, prioritizing the freedom to wage war over ecological stability. The maintenance of a mechanized global empire exacts an unsustainable compounding toll. It ravages the bodies of the citizens it recruits, and the ecosystem of the planet they inhabit. Historical sociology dictates that empires inevitably import the violence of their perimeters back into the homeland. When the tools of expansion exhaust their external use, they turn inward. Scholars call this the imperial boomerang. You can see it in domestic law enforcement. Through the 1033 program, the Pentagon has transferred over $5.1 billion in excess military hardware, including assault rifles and mine-resistant armored vehicles, to over 8,200 local police agencies, transforming them into paramilitary forces. This architecture is now aligning with an overt Christian nationalism openly embraced at the highest levels of the Pentagon, where military operations are framed as divinely sanctioned missions against godless enemies. The weapons, tactics, and ideologies originally meant for foreign populations are now converging within the United States. The tools of the empire have been refocused on the domestic population itself. But it doesn't have to be this way. This graph shows diverging trend lines starting from 1948, when Costa Rica abolished its army entirely to fund education and healthcare. Today, it outpaces the United States in literacy, healthcare access, and life expectancy. A militarized society is a political choice, not an inevitability. The architecture of the American empire relies on its invisibility, and the first step to dismantling it is simply refusing to look away.